Here we go. All right, so post-war United States, the United States after the war. And the thing is that war, especially 8 years of war, well, 8 years of war really changed the country. And the fear of tyranny was everywhere, and an autocratic leader. So you have these kind of things going on. First off, they all decided, I mean, it was not generally accepted. By 1781, a republic was a form of government that would avoid tyranny. Government by representation. No, they're not clear who would choose the representatives or what kind of people could be representatives, or for that matter, who could vote. But a republic that will avoid tyranny by not having one autocratic leader. Also, they really feared central government. They look at it as the top-down rule from Parliament and the king. So power will be diffused to the states, with the idea being that will be the best guard for their security and rights. Also, one more thing I almost forgot. And the states did things like virtually every state would put a term limit for governors of only 1 year, and members of the assembly for 1 year. The idea being to rotate people through, so not one single group or one person, more importantly, would become too powerful. But there's an economic depression too. Okay, it's like this after every war. This is pre-capitalism, so it's nothing like an economic depression would be today. It's just a different style. But remember, they kind of had an economic depression since the French and Indian War. And then we have the war, which is an economic depression. And then this, it just never got out of it. So coming out of the war was a general feeling that times were getting worse. And if you feel tomorrow is going to be worse, it changes everything you do today. Because we have no other place to look than the past and say, oh, things are getting bad. Things might be bad tomorrow. Better sit on what I have now, which makes things worse. So the other big thing were two things that came out of this that terrified the elite, that were the original kind of pushers of the patriot cause. The first one was democracy. Now, don't think in terms of a real democracy where the people vote on everything like ancient Athens, where all citizens voted for every single law. But what that meant is the people are sovereign, the people have power. Ultimately, meaning they pick the leaders of the republic and they decide what happens. They write the Constitution. Now, who are the people? That still is not clear what that meant. For most, that would have been white men. And they wanted leveling, which is another term for being egalitarian, to level the difference between the classes. There were huge class differences, especially in the South. And the thought was, we sacrificed. We potentially gave our lives and our riches and had our homes destroyed. Something better has got to come out of this. A life of security and economic security and political security. There are a lot of people who thought the government should have a lot of control over the economy to make sure that people have, okay, not everything exactly equal, but not a big gap between the rich and the poor. Like things like controlling the money supply, making sure, etc. So, that's a letterhead of a newspaper in Philadelphia. I just thought it was kind of cool. But you'll notice with that two representations of liberty on this letterhead, that's supposed to be more and more they started calling this Lady Liberty. And that would get its really name from the French Revolution. And then American Indians. Remember I told you about liberty and the Mohawks. Okay, so the first form of government, it's the Articles or the Confederation, the Confederacy, you might see it called. Don't get this confused with the future Confederate States of America. If I call, think about context. If I say the Confederation for the Constitution, clearly I don't mean the Southern Confederacy of the Civil War. It was actually written in 1777 by the Second Continental Congress. Remember, the Second Continental Congress was the ad hoc government of the US. They're the ones who declared independence. They're the ones who picked Washington. It was that Second Continental Congress. But it wasn't until 1781 that they officially opened it. And it really didn't have any power till 1784. That's the Treaty of Paris. So everyone got this was picked by the Second Continental Congress. They picked the government. No, it did not go to the people. It was a small little group called the Second Continental Congress. But it was weak. Diffuse the power. If the federal government's weak, that means the state powers by definition are stronger, whatever that might mean. So, in the Congress, each state could send as many representatives as they wanted, but each state only had one vote. Pennsylvania had one vote, Rhode Island had one vote, Virginia had one vote. What kind of states were really upset by this? Think about size. Specifically larger population. Yeah. Virginia, the most populous colony, the New York and Pennsylvania were catching up. They had the same number of votes as Rhode Island, or for that matter, the alligators down here. How many people live in that many? It's not clear what a citizen is, but people in the United States. They're furious. Big states are mad. Really upset. One state, one vote. Now that legacy has lived on to the United States today. As a compromise in the Constitutional Convention, they kept that equality of representation per state. What branch of the United States Congress today has an equal number of members per state, regardless of its size? Now, you should know this. And if you don't, it's time to know stuff. Right? It's time to know. It's now time. Yeah. Senate. The Senate. Very good. How many members per state? 2. So how many senators are there? Yeah, 100 senators. If there's a tie, the vice president breaks the tie. So a 50-50 tie is actually then goes to, they didn't think there'd be political parties, but whoever goes to whatever party controls the presidency. So, weak central government. Congress, one vote. But to make sure that there will be a top-down tyrannical central government, 9 votes per state to pass a law. 9 votes. A supermajority. 9 votes. And to amend it, to change the articles, 13 votes. Now, next thing is a question. Think about, okay, now laws are going to come into the Confederation Congress. What is going to be passed? What is passed if there's a supermajority of 9 votes to pass a law? What is passed? What kind of laws are passed? Let me ask you another question then. Is anything going to be passed? And that's what you have to get down. Virtually nothing's passed. And it's impossible to change. It's impossible to change the articles, and you can't pass a law. I repeat, you can't pass a law. If there's a problem, you can't pass anything. If you can't pass anything, what's government for? If problems between states can't be resolved, what is it for? Problems of land, of ownership of land or whatever can't be passed, what's government for? If there's a war and the federal government can't do anything, what's it for? If no one knows what the value of a dollar is, then what's government for? If you can't pass a law in the central government, you don't have a government and the whole thing breaks down. And that's what we're talking about here. They can't make a change. So anything controversial, all it takes is 5 votes and you can't pass it. Hey, let's say you want to restrict the expansion of slave codes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 won't pass. Nothing's passed. Now, history echoes. Thank you for this. I've been waiting for this pass all day.
Yeah, it's here.
Yes.
I know. I know.
That could have been an assassin. I could have a shiv in my back right now. Do you know what a shiv is? Oh, when you do hard time in prison, you know what a shiv is. I can tell you stories. Yeah, it's a homemade knife. We gotta work. What am I gonna do with you people? What happens if a potential assassin comes in? And what's in a potential assassin of means?
Who's sending assassins out?
Everybody. Everybody's out to get me. I'm not paranoid. I just know it. And you know, someone's looking over my shoulder. So you have to warn me if somebody comes.
Close the door.
How will I escape?
They won't be able to get in. Not the
The window.
So, what happens if a potential assassin, meaning anybody, comes in? You have to warn me. How do you warn me?
They go.
By yelling assassin. And if it's an administrator, then we really gotta be afraid, right? So then we have to yell assassin and hide under your desk, correct? So let's practice this. Let's say I'm just somebody walking in and you have to yell assassin. You're saving my life. Let's try. Are you ready? Let's try it. Somebody walking in. Just imagine I have a shift. They're frowned upon. I'm gone. You can sacrifice me. Our future is destroyed at time. One more time.
Oh.
Here we go. That's not bad, but we gotta work on this. About the administrator, what do? Assassin, and then right under your desk. All right, I tell you what, I am not in good hands. All right. I can see, it might be over now. Like some people are too cool. Okay, moving on. Nothing is passed. But now, history echoes. Could there be something like that today? Back to the United States Senate. The Senate makes their own rules. Senate has what we call unlimited debate. It's called a filibuster. And they will not vote on a law until debate is ended. And they can debate on anything they want. There's unlimited debate. So a senator technically can hold up the Senate for as long as they can talk. That doesn't happen anymore. They have rules around that. But to stop debate, you stop the filibuster, and then you could vote on a bill. Anybody know how many senators are required to do that? Not quite, close. 60, very close. Used to be 2/3, now it's 60. So to pass almost anything in the Senate, you need 60 votes. 60 votes out of 100, that's what we call a supermajority. So what's passed in the Senate? This really hasn't been used in the last about 25 years. Does anything pass the Senate? It's almost impossible to get anything past the Senate. They have a few rules to make it a simple majority rule, which is what the founders thought. But the Senate demands 60 votes. So you have a situation today where it's almost impossible to pass a law. You see a problem down the road. When they couldn't pass a law back in 1787, what did that lead to? A rebellion at nearly the end of the country. You can't pass a law. Then people lose faith in the government. They lose faith in the system. It's actually pretty terrifying. Right at this moment, they can't pass a budget. And looks like next week the government's going to shut. And the economy is already really shaky. 60% of the American public think the economy is getting significantly worse. This hasn't been this bad in a very long time. If you can't pass a budget, what are you for? Do you see a problem down the road? Nothing is passed. Everybody hates Congress, and people don't know that it requires 60% of the vote. I always do find that amusing when people say, "I hate Congress." I will say, "What about the filibuster?" And I just get blank looks. Now you know, aren't you? You guys are, see? Moving up in the world. This is real. This is big. History echoes. It repeats. Things have happened before, and we can see it again because humans are all basically the same. Very rational. And they can't back up. But what the deal is right now, Republicans have a majority. Republicans control all branches of government. And Democrats say, but you need 7 Democrats to pass a law. If you need 7 Democrats, here's the issue. Democrats are saying the last tax bill is going to kick about 20 million people off of healthcare. And Democrats are saying we want to give their healthcare benefit. And Republicans are saying no. President Trump said, nope, not going to do it. Nope, we're not going to do it. So what's going to happen? No vote. They might come up with a compromise, I don't know. But do you see how hard it is to get anything done? That's where we're at right now. And you could argue that's a good thing or bad thing. That's not even the point. The point is, if nothing gets done, what's government? So, back to this fun. Who carries out the laws of Congress? When Congress passes the law, who carries it out in a generic constitution? Legislature passes the law, who carries out the laws? It's called, no, there's a name for it. In a system, it could be the king doing it. It's the executive. And there's no executive. There's no executive. Why? They didn't want tyranny. They assumed, now we get to the problem. Cole mentions the states, there's no one to carry out the laws. He mentioned states, but the states, do they have to carry it out then if there's no one to enforce it? So the states, they'll pass a law to be kind of a choice. They don't have to do it. So the laws have no teeth. You pass a law, nothing happens. That's actually really scary. If you have a country that is broken up into pieces, provinces, states, whatever it might be, and the individual provinces or states say, I'm not going to do it, there goes your country. It falls apart. So, oh, by the way, isn't this picture creepy? This is supposed to be the Constitutional Convention, and they have these ghost-like figures with massive noses. Noses are really hard to draw. Never tried. The only thing that's harder is an accurate hand. Hands are really hard. So, there's no power to tax. The states are going to contribute money, they hoped. Are the states going to contribute money? Maybe, no. So, if you can't tax, you don't have a financial system. You don't have money. You can't borrow money. Every government, every entity has to have the power to borrow money. They have to be able to borrow money. No one's going to loan you money if you can't pay it back. No one's going to loan it. What are the tools that governments borrow money? What are those instruments called? Does anyone know generically? Taxes are the collecting of revenue. You've all heard of them. The IRS is people actually collect the taxes. I know there's so many names. They're called a bond. A bond. Hey, last week, didn't Helena just have an election about building new schools? It was a bond election. The Helena School District is going to sell bonds and then pay it back over the next 20 years. And that's how they're going to pay for the new Helena High. And be a lot of stuff here that actually is going to be awesome. It's nothing but construction. And then, actually, the thing I know that no one's talking about is, the big thing about the construction is. It's going to be student parking lot. So you guys will be parking in Townsend. You don't have to walk. No, the point is, I have no idea. It's going to be crazy. That's really the only place. So think about fairgrounds. You have to be here, 15 minutes earlier. I mean, it's going to be something. So for those of us short timers, it's going to be kind of funny. But it's off the future. Off the news. Moving on. But interest. Hey, no one's going to loan money. No one's going to loan money to somebody for free. And so government has to get interest. Just like if you borrow money from a bank, they charge interest. But what's going to happen to interest if you have no tax system? They got to pay more interest. Just like if one of you try to walk into a bank and try to borrow money, let's say you go, hey, I'm going to borrow $3 million to buy a yacht. I'm bring this yacht to Canyon Ferry and buy a 400-foot yacht. I'm buying an aircraft carrier. No. What's the bank going to look at you and say? Especially someone your age. No offense, but your age. I'm just telling you the way life is. You're still a student. You don't have a full-time job really that's secure. 10 or 15 or 30 years. So what kind of interest are you gonna have to pay? Okay, first off, they'll say no, but if they take you the loan, you'll pay interest out of the world. I mean, if I go in and try to borrow money to buy a car, I will pay lower interest fee. Just because more security. Makes sense, doesn't it? But if the government can't collect taxes, would anybody borrow their bonds? So you have to either have to charge more interest or no one's gonna buy it. Then it becomes chaos. So if you can't tax, you don't have a money system. You just don't have money. So what that means, you can't control the money supply. If you can't control the money supply, there's no control over inflation or deflation. You can't have a real currency. In fact, every state's gonna have a currency. City's gonna have currency. People will just make currency. And there's still money floating around from the colonial days and from Britain or Spain or everybody else. If you can't control inflation or deflation, we've already kind of mentioned this. If you don't know what your dollar will buy tomorrow, what are you going to do with that dollar today? Either spend it immediately because you don't know what prices will be, which, by the way, if you spend it today and everybody else does the same thing, what's going to happen to prices? If everybody spends your dollar, everyone spends today, what will happen to prices? They go up because of high demand. Either you're just going to spend it because you got to buy it, which kind of what happened in April, May, because of President Trump's tariffs. So all these importers bought a ton of stuff before the tariffs took place, and they've been kind of using all this stuff, and that's why they're running out, and that's why prices are starting to go up. Because of the tariff bombing kick. Back to this. Or what else to do with the money? I don't know what tomorrow's gonna be, I better do what with this dollar? I better hide it. I better put it in a jar and put it in the backyard, because I don't know what tomorrow's gonna be. You see the problem with the economy if everyone does that at the same time? If no one spends today, what's gonna happen to businesses tomorrow? Inflation or deflation affects everything. Just imagine going into a store, going in to buy something, and there's no price on it, you have to kind of bargain for everything. If you got to bargain for everything, what's going to get done? There's a billion transactions. There's a billion financial or business transactions every day in the world. Because it seems just to go really fast. Just imagine that. We have to bargain every price. What happens to the world economy? By the way, this is actually really important. There was, it was a lie, but they said that cryptocurrency would replace money. That's why I can't replace money, because it's never stable. The price fluctuates so much, and the transactions are really slow. Financial transaction with stable currencies just happens seamlessly as of today. We'll see tomorrow, right? That's why we have to assume it'd be like that tomorrow, or we get worried today. All these little things, huge, and they were affecting people then, and you can imagine how affect people now. So foreign policy, there's no president to speak for foreign policy. That means there's 13 voices. Every state can come up with their own voice. So for example, remember the Treaty of Paris? It said that New Orleans will be used, can be open. But think about Spain. Spain is looking at this too big country here and saying, we don't have to obey anybody. We're going to charge tolls that don't care. The British aren't going to leave their forts. And loyalists were promised compensation. No, we're not going to do it. Because the federal government has no power to enforce a treaty. You can imagine the problems that's going to lead down the road. Think about all these international agreements. Why are things so seamless? And why are prices going to go up? Right. What is a tax on tariffs called? Oh no, tax. A tariff is a tax on what? Importers, the people buy stuff from overseas. I'll say you can have 13 states issuing their own tariffs. And for that matter, couldn't they charge a tariff on other states? Why not? Are they going to? Yeah. So there's no armed forces. They thought militias would deal with this. Please have real militias. But the states are going to really guard their militias. And militias are not very effective. Remember I told you they kind of ran away, especially slave states. Slave states are obsessed about keeping control of their militia because of the fear of what? Slave rebellion was an overriding fear that they all talked about. And it's one of the things that's been a great mystery to me. Once I started to learn about this, I was never told about the fear of slave rebellions when I was in school. It's not really emphasized. I think because they just don't want to talk about how bad slavery was. They were scared of it all the time because this might shock you. Slavery really is bad. Now, I hope all of you are going, of course slavery is bad. Oh, that's going to be a movement to say that slavery wasn't that bad. Slaves actually like slavery. That's coming. Hey, so the Civil War wasn't about slavery. That's what's coming. So, moving on. There's no federal court system. Hey, you're in one state. How do you have a conflict with another state if there's no final court of arbitration? If states have disagreements, how do you deal with each other? And there's no federal government to step in. What if two states go to war? Which happened. New York and Connecticut went to war. And New York almost went to war with New Jersey too. The deal was trade. What's cobbler? What do cobblers make? Shoes. There were a bunch of cobblers in New York City. And they were making shoes. But their problem was, once the war ended, Britain started exporting shoes to the United States. What happens to the price of shoes if you get a bunch of foreign shoes come in? Price goes down because of more supply. So everyone has to, there's more supply, prices drop. So what did New York do? They charged a tariff on British shoes, import. So anybody importing British shoes had to pay a tariff. So what happened to the price of British shoes? They go up, protecting New York cobblers. So what did Britain do? It's called dumping. They dumped a bunch of shoes in New Haven, Connecticut. And then the importers here just brought them into New York. So what did New York do? They put a tariff on Connecticut. What did Connecticut do? They put a tariff on New York. What did New York do in response? They put armed guards and blockaded the border. What did Connecticut do? They sent their militia too. Next thing you know, they're shooting at each other. But the federal government's going to step in and stop that, right? There's no one to stop it. There's no one. What do you do? Hey guys, cut it out. I mean, the last time there were two states shooting at each other, federal marshals came in and put a stop to it. You may know the last time states were shooting at each other seriously. I mean, like a serious conflict between states. Arizona and California. It's not long. Kind of makes sense, right? So, I mean, it's not good to shoot each other, but there's someone there to put a stop to it. So, do you see all the problems? Western lands were even a bigger one. You have all these competing land claims. Every state had a competing land claim. Virginia claimed basically everything, all the way to the Pacific. But Connecticut, New York, Massachusetts, everyone had claims to this. Georgia, South Carolina, and then there's also competing Spanish claims. And all these states wanted that land because they wanted the revenues that would come from tax collection from these new lands. So what do? Because all the states had debt too. They had bonds to repay. Their tax system was messed up and money was kind of meaningless. And then you have all these speculators, people like George Washington or Alexander Hamilton, who wanted to come in and scoop up land cheap and get rich. To get rich. They need these land claims to deal with. And let's be clear about it, to scoop up the land and steal it from the people who live there. Can't forget that. So, what do? There's going to be two big laws passed. Oh, almost forgot one thing. You know what a squatter is? A squatter is someone who just comes in and does what? And just takes it without any legal background. Now, legal means from the point of view of the United States, and they call it the right of conquest. It was obviously a gray area to the Europeans because the woodland nations had a very clear claim, but the United States said we conquered it, so it's ours. So, and then what about the preserving the Union here and here? There was a great fear that the West would break. And that fear would not be resolved to the 1830s, 1840s. It was curtailed somewhat, but they still talked about it. Railroads. Once you had railroads, then we got a north-south break coming. So, the land ordinance of 1785. What this said is all states must give up their claim. And then federal land, meaning all the land they got from the Treaty of Paris that aren't in a state, will be surveyed. So they surveyed all federal land, and all these surveyors went out. The first area they surveyed was this little corner of Ohio. So they called the longitude line, they called it ranges, latitude, and they divided it up. They created a whole grid of little squares. You saw little squares there? 6 by 6 townships. I gotta remember to do this. I was gonna do 6 by 6 townships. Then each township will be divided into 36 1 by 1 sections. So you look at a map at all areas, almost all areas that came in after the Revolutionary War, it's all a grid pattern. You look at Montana, it's all divided up into sections and townships, the whole place. So people buy quarter sections, half sections. Okay, there's some areas like mountains were difficult to survey, rivers, but everything else is square. You get a state like Iowa, which is really flat, the whole place is square. The counties are all square because of townships and ranges. The roads go either north, south, or east, west. It's kind of humorous if you look at a map. Montana's a little different because of the terrain, but it's all divided that way. So like a quarter section was 160 acres. And have you noticed, if you look at property ownership, it's all square. I meant to grab one, I was gonna put it up, a map of Montana, divvied up by sections. I'll have to remember to do that, to show you real fast in a moment. Because it's really kind of remarkable. It's all square. Oh, one state that came after the revolution is not like this at all. You may know what state came in as an independent country for 9 years and became part of the US. Alaska was a territory. So Hawaii was an independent country. Actually, Hawaii doesn't have either. Good, I totally forgot about Hawaii. Hawaii is one. Hawaii was an independent kingdom. There's one other. I was thinking continental United States. Texas was an independent country. I can mention Hawaii. Yeah, the US would take Hawaii. It was an independent country. So it's going to be established down the road that the money from one section will go to education, creating the beginnings of what we call public education, where we see as a society, it is worth it to have schools and an educated population. Not just, so many people think of jobs, but the idea is if you're going to have a republic, citizens of the republic have got to know things like what I told you today, a filibuster. If you don't know stuff like that, boy, can you be manipulated. I'm not kidding. You can be really manipulated. And this might shock you. People will manipulate you. So who should you trust? Me. I'll tell you everything you need to know. Isn't that nice? I'm here for you. So here are a little bigger one. You can see how that first area that was surveyed, but pretty soon it's going to go westward. I should add, the various tribes realized very quickly those surveyors were a real threat. A real threat. So now a little background of the next law that's going to be passed. But it got enough votes. It's kind of a compromise. The Land Ordinance of 1784 was proposed by Thomas Jefferson. And Jefferson, he looked at the future of the United States. He believed in a republic where people are independent to make their own decisions. But he realized one thing that's very important: slavery. He proposed no slave codes west of the Appalachian Mountains. Now, without slave codes, there can be no slavery. Is that on your watch? Doing that on this. Oh, what are you doing? Okay, what? So you have to begin. Now I want to know what you're doing. That's that. Which part? Oh. A lot. I think that's the mathematical formula. Yeah, it's actually remarkable how much they did. No slave codes. Slavery cannot function without slave codes. Because this is what Thomas Jefferson realized. Slavery is tyranny for everybody. Slave codes have to repress the rights of everybody. Remember the fear of slave rebellion? If somebody, a free person, will say slavery is bad, could that lead to a slave rebellion? Could that lead to slaves, enslaved people trying to become free? You have to repress everybody. Slavery and Republican forms of government are incompatible. And Jefferson knew it. Slavery is a form of dictatorship, and that's what they needed, an autocratic rule. And so Jefferson is saying that the country can't survive if you have slave codes. It will break apart. So think about it, that's only 1 year after the Treaty of Paris. And they're already in rumblings in the articles of the Confederation Congress that slavery is going to destroy this. They knew it then. This is not a mystery. They knew it was going to break it up. And so he proposed making 14 states all free. Free means no slave codes. Free means no slave codes. All of them. 14. He had interesting names. I'll show you a couple. He just kind of arbitrarily divvied it up. 14 states. Burke. He got 8 votes. 8 votes. Meaning what happened? Let's look. 1, 2. We'd have an entirely different history. No, I don't know what would have happened, but entirely different. So now a compromise that will get 9 votes has to be passed. So Jefferson's initial plan. One more thing. You notice Jefferson didn't say get rid of slave codes in Virginia. Gee, I wonder who has 270 slaves in Virginia. Jefferson. He didn't want to change. He liked his wine. He liked his books. He liked his mansions. So Jefferson knew slavery was evil and tyranny and destroyed the country, but he was unwilling to give up. There's a lot of complexities to our history, isn't there? So, the next land ordinance we call the Northwest Ordinance. This is the Northwest Ordinance. I will simply call it the Northwest Ordinance. Northwest Ordinance. So what do? You have this territory. They got to be states. We got to figure it out. So 5,000 people will become a territory. It will still be governed by the federal government, but now there'll be laws. So 5,000 people is pretty small. So for example, Washington, D.C. is still a territory, and therefore the federal government still has technically control over it, which is kind of fascinating. Washington, D.C. is nearly as many people as Montana, yet they have no senators and no members of the House. Even more amazing is Puerto Rico. Significantly bigger than Montana, all American citizens, and yet they can't vote for president, they don't have members of the Senate, don't have members of the House. All technically governed by the U.S. Congress, who passes the laws, but they allow Puerto Rico to have some sort of self-rule. 60,000 people becomes a state. They knew 60,000 people was pretty small, but they allowed it to become a state. Now, this might not seem like that big of a deal, except for one thing. It's a state, meaning any state that here, like Ohio, will be a state just like Pennsylvania. So the original 13 technically won't have more rights or power than new states. That's different. That's unusual. But what kind of government will go there? While they're still territories, the federal government can decide their laws. And what will it be? No slave codes north of the Ohio River. No slave codes. So if there's no slave codes north of the Ohio, what does that mean? What does it infer about states south of the Ohio? No slave codes. What does it imply? Slave codes. Do you see what happened? They've just done the sectional divide, north and south over slavery. So it just assumed Kentucky Territory wild slave codes. Will they? Of course. It's said. So, two things really quick. So you have the sectional divide, north and south being created. The two surveyors of Maryland and Pennsylvania colonies who surveyed this line, their last name are Mason and Dixon. So this line here is called the Mason-Dixon line. And then the Ohio River. Mason-Dixon, Ohio River, north and south. So if you hear something about like the Mason-Dixon line, that's implying the gap between the north and the south. Anyone ever heard the term Mason-Dixon? Few, maybe. They act like that. Few, maybe. Okay, so sectional divide. Gee, we're coming up to slavery, aren't we? We're coming up to the Civil War. They knew it. They knew it was coming. So, last thing for today, the money supply. But this is the biggest issue. Sure, they had two relevant, oh, those are still the law. The Northwest Ordinance and the Land Ordinance are still the law today. That's why there's two Dakotas. Because they only needed 60,000 people. I'll tell you why there's two Dakotas. That's why there's this place called Montana, or Idaho, or Wyoming. This whole block came in for very political reasons, all at the same time. What year did Montana become a state? 1889. We're coming to that. So inflation, deflation, last thing for today. Inflation, deflation, creditor, debtor. All right? What's creditor? Yeah, they loan money. Debtor? Now I should have. Debtor borrows. Everybody's a debtor almost. Everybody. Most creditors are also debtors too, but there's not near as many creditors. By definition, creditors have to have extra money, right? Or access to money. Last question for today, just a simple question. Inflation, deflation, we've talked about this before. If you're a debtor, which one helps you? A little bit of inflation, a little bit of deflation. What'd you say? Inflation? Who thinks inflation helps creditors? Who thinks deflation helps creditors? Who is scared to answer? If what happens to the value of money in inflation? The value of money does what in inflation? The value of money goes down. What happens to prices? So if the value of money drops, that means when you're paying back your loan in the future, you're paying back money of lesser value. So Cole is right. Inflation, a little bit of inflation helps debtors. Creditors, they want deflation. They're getting money back of higher value. Well, let's look at it more logically. Creditors would want almost no inflation. Debtors want a little bit of inflation. Deflation destroys the economy. So it's like that much inflation, credit. A little bit of inflation, yeah. I got that? Does anybody know what money's worth in 1787? Did you have inflation or deflation? Oh. Come on, we'll finish this. Because we're getting to a rebellion. Oh, I should have. I know value of money goes up, prices go down, all that. There's a lot of stuff. I get it. Money supply is a big deal. That's the kind of thing that leads to wars, revolution. Hey, when you had massive inflation of food in the Middle East in 2011, there was revolution all over, from Algeria all the way to Syria. They're still kind of having it in Syria as well. You want some homework? I already gave it to you. Hopefully tomorrow I'll have the test graded, but I still have a few makeups. I just know that I didn't never saw the space invader. That's the video of me tonight. Old people like me should be space invaders.
Photography days.
Space invaders. What do you see? There you go. You're gonna go. No, I get it because it's.
Yeah.
Space invaders. Ouch. You have no idea how cool it was. Space invaders. Yeah. Huh? Liddy. I like the kitty. Very nice kitty. We should start. We'll start drawing more kitties. Have a great day, everybody. Right when you find work, hang by your thumbs. Goodbye, everybody. Get good. Why not?
Honestly, I just find in order.
Keep crying.
Yeah. Well, I know that, I just,
You're just tired.
no, I was just gonna write too much, because I had to, and I didn't wrong. What I do.
You're fine. No, you did really well. For you, I did.
Yeah, great.
Second, if I remember. Good job.
Other people know if I can work.
What?
Hi. I took the extra credits.
For what? What do you get extra credit for? Yes.
Okay, and also, I'm gonna wait for my friends to get here. But, well, we're supposed to do the summer assignment for students.
Oh, well, I was gonna get a little test on first day. On the third day, or remember the election assembly? Brody did the test. Yeah, remember that, because I thought, when I first saw it, I thought the assembly would not be difficult. So I was gonna get just an open, eligible basic. But since we did not, I didn't want to have one class out of whack. Well done, yeah, awesome, cool, collective.
We're like so locked in. Got our photos back from. Oh, no.
Oh, bro, I saying what? You can back more.
Oh, yeah, we went.
Off the wall.
That's part of my shorts. They're behind the space. You're like.
Still got it.
You're like, way you're examining.
Oh, no, okay. I'll have to have your board. We want to.
I'm here all day.
Got over. Yes, sir.
You didn't quit on the project.
There's the way cutie.
If you got the maps done, I'll give, did I say give a little extra credit?
Tom, you peeled an orange for me?
Person, I've never seen some big cuties.
I'm looking at one right
I was just saying, like,
What should I just divide?
I was like, is it an orange or a cutie? It looks like it's big, and I was just like,
You get it.
now. Beauty, yeah.
There's a box on the back, you can draw a picture.
he just believes it's a small one.
I'm
I think it's just like.
Is it a brand? Is it like a Kleenex type of thing?
I think so. But I've never seen like any other brand for it, but like. No.
Like, just a brand. Kleenex, what else was there? Jet ski? Did you know jet ski? That's not even what it's called.
Somebody came.
It's like a
The Lyras.
motorcycle or something like that.
That's messed up.
It's so weird. Like you think, you think,
Because it's the only one that it's used.
I'm gonna figure out.
what are some other weird things?
I don't.
They got your maps if you got them.
Maps. I'd be not.
Oh, where's that go till tomorrow?
Even put the map in, I didn't get any of the other stuff.
I do not recall.
I think it's classic, it's kind of confused. Or anybody.
Oh, should we lie to them? They both go for it.
Elijah, Devin, okay.
That's not good.
Nope, Devin, good.
That was sad, rest in pieces.
All right, first thing first. If anybody has the map, make sure you put your name on it, your rank, your serial number. I'll give you a little bit extra credit, like I said. If not, I'll take it for everybody tomorrow. Put on your map that you're turning in on Wednesday. So, rip it off very carefully. Jot down Wednesday. Next. Very good.
Four. Three. Four.
Just put down Wednesday so I know you turned it in. So I'll make sure you get extra credit.
144.
That's just if you needed to keep. Draw a key. Quick draw.
I have no idea.
If you don't have the box, fill it, quick draw count there. No? So those of you who are not turning in today, you have to have it tomorrow.
Maybe that's.
Kitty, very good. Don't get draw a cat. No, don't have it. Go.
Mine's in now.
What's the one?
Oh, work. We talked about that. You're good. You're good.
It was a distraction.
Let me see.
Oh, he's a little.
Like my classes are still in it. I had like 3 different classes that need myself to.
So vowel or pause?
Classes did you take?
Yeah, most of them were like trade stuff.
Dance.
And like, I had a thing, so
See, that's gotta be chipmunk looking.
it's not enough for college credit.
One time.
I do it later.
All right. So there are a few of you that have not taken the test. You have to make it up. You have to set up time with me. I'm not going to hunt you down. I'm not going to harass you about it. It is your responsibility to do that. Just a sec. So you have to come up and set up a time to do it. And it has to be a time when I can do it too. And by the way, I'm not kidding you. I do